Basically, it's meant as a discussion with Hind, Aboud, Kabawat. She is an attorney and international consul at Joseph Young and Associates in Toronto, and she's also Foreign Affairs Director for the Syrian Public Relations Association in Damascus and the President of Women for Peace in Middle East. In addition, Ms. Kabawat is a Senior Research Associate in Public Diplomacy at the Center for World Religions, Diplomacy and Conflict Resolution at George Mason University, and we are delighted to have with us President Merton, the President of George Mason University. I know what a long way it is to get from there to here. Thanks for coming. Hind has led a variety of public diplomacy efforts in recent years in Syria to promote interfaith tolerance and cooperation, modernization and reform, as well as educational innovation in conflict resolution and diplomacy education. She holds a master's in law and diplomacy from the Fletcher School of Law and diplomacy at Tufts University, and a degree in Bachelor in Economics from Damascus University, and a law degree from the Arab University in Beirut, Lebanon. She is the recipient of the 2007 Women's Peace Initiative Award, which was awarded to her by the Tannenbaum Center for Interreligious Understanding of New York. Hind is a very good friend, and I have met her, I think, 4 years ago when we were together at a conference of businesswomen in the Middle East, and we have since cooperated on a number of projects regarding women's issues, and I hope that she would be able to elaborate a little bit on the status of women in the region and in her own country. And on a personal note, when I had my problems in Iran, a group of my Middle Eastern friends got together and were terribly and very active in trying to get me out of there, and Hind was among the leaders of that group. And I would also like to recommend to you her article in the magazine, the Fletcher Forum of World Affairs, and she has a wonderful article which is called Forward-Looking Leadership, a Syrian Perspective. And we are, of course, delighted to have with us Ambassador Mad Mustafa from Syria, who spoke here last year. So it's your second visit here, not your first. Thanks for coming. Hind, you have 35 minutes, and then we will open the floor to questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Hali, for the nice introductions. Friends, and friends. First, I hope you don't mind filming this, because we're doing this project about peace, and we're filming a little bit of my speech. So I hope you don't mind this one. And thank you all for coming, and I appreciate my friend Hali and President Merton and my brother Imad and all the other friends here. Thank you very much. We are living in an era when many regions of the world is changing. Autocratic governments have successfully reformed to the rule of law, constitutional government, and democratic values. Among them, most of South America, South Africa, and many other countries. But it is both troubling and disappointing that most of the Middle East remain saddled with an autocratic political culture. As the world knows, there has been unprecedented transfer of wealth in the Middle East because of the booming oil economy. But such economic good fortune has not resulted in a maturing of the Middle East government. Small governing, some officially secular, other strongly religious, hold control. They exercise more or less complete arbitrary power over their people. As a result, the politicians unfairly enrich their favored insiders. And the population in these countries continue to suffer from inferior education, mediocre health care, and an economy outside the oil sector which doesn't generate nearly enough jobs for our people. There is a direct connection between the immature autocratic institutions of the Arab Middle East and the stunned nature of economic and social development in the region. So despite all the wealth in the region, most of the people of the Middle East remain stuck in ignorance and poverty. So how can this be changed? How can the governance of the region become more accountable and transparent? And what factors prevent the various countries of the region from becoming fully functional, mature political societies? Where dissent is tolerated and dissenters not imprisoned, where political are accountable for their own actions, where an independent judiciary and free press provide the checks to arbitrary political rule, where government serve the interests of all the people of our region, where honesty in commercial relations, business affairs is the norm, not the exception, where systemic corruption does not undermine the very soul of these societies. So before I discuss an agenda for change, let me first provide some idea why the Arab Middle East is so politically childish. Some argue that it's historical, that the region has only known political absolutism and has no tradition of democracy and the rule of law. So, well, how do you explain Turkey? Turkey one time was the ruler of the region, the whole region. The Ottoman past was the very essence of the royal absolutism. Our neighbor to the north is a fellow Muslim country. But Turkey enjoys a constitutional government, the rule of law, and it's functioning very well with democracy. So why Turkey been able to transition toward a good governance and the Middle East has not? It's a very good question and very difficult to answer. But it does suggest that nothing historical within our Arab societies that make it impossible for us to mature politically. Here another theory. Perhaps it is the consequences of the 60-year-long conflict between the Arabs and the Israelis. That's too much of our time and energy has been wasted in fighting each other, as opposed to creating a more fair and just society at home. Some make this argument, usually those government, and usually they are justifying their own iron grip in power. And some countries have been at peace with Israel for decades, but their political cultures remain as undemocratic as ever. So let's not blame anybody about our political misfortunes. The real cause within our own society. Among the most guilty are the secular, westernized elites who are not members of the ruling political establishment. Of course, you would think that those people should be at the vanguard, pressing the political change and liberal reform. Such people should be the pillars of a new civil society in the Arab world. But too many of them, and for many years, were controlled by fear about what true democratic reform would bring. Everyone agreed that eventually the Muslim masses would choose Islamic fundamentalism to govern them. And the state sanctions secularism of Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Egypt would be toast. So the westernized elites who should have been the main advocates for change kept quiet and enjoy their economic privileges and secular rights. And those who did try for change and reforms are in jail. So the government elite have retained absolute control of most Arab societies in the Middle East, as they have pursued policies that have kept them, the population, for the most part, passive and oppressed. Let's take the educational system in the region. A highly educated population is absolutely essential to be successful to the knowledge-based economy for the 21st century. But for the most part, the educational system in the Arab Middle East is substandard and mediocre. But perhaps that suits the agenda of the governing classes. They don't relish an educated population hankering for real change and less corruption. And then there is a status of women in the Arab Middle East. In most of the rest of the world, the empowering woman has been a vital part of the modernization of the society, not in our region. And in many parts of the Arab world, women don't even enjoy the basics human rights. So perhaps I am optimistic, but I think a greater role for women would have positive impact on liberalization in our society. No, the root cause of the political immaturity of the Arab Middle East is primarily located in our totally undeveloped political and social infrastructure. So simply put, the Middle East lacks of the necessary institutions to grow democracy and good governance. For starters, the lack of independent judiciary. Also, the free press, or even free academic culture. So there is no means for check on political authority. Second, the government in all our Arab, Middle East, and society are unaccountable to the people. No free and open elections. There is no peaceful transfer of power in these societies. So as Lord Atkins once said, power corrupt, but absolute power corrupted absolutely. So what happens? Transparency in both political and commercial affairs is non-existent, and corruption everywhere. The systemic corruption in the Middle East is a huge drag on economic development and prosperity. At the moment, all the world is eager to pay for the region's oil wealth. But is the Middle East beating a path to invest in high technology industries? Or other generators of future wealth? Not really. Turkey, in the opposite of this case, a highly educated workforce and relatively clean government result in dynamic and growing economy. So why are the leaders in the Arab Middle East so reluctant to embrace change in their countries, in my countries, in our Arab Middle East? Due to the absolute power, they have security and political stability and absence of democracy. So why change? Little accountability, as there is little governmental transparency, little participation in civil society, no freedom of speech, and finally, no grassroots movement. So why change? History proved that change will happen and must happen if we want it or not. And in our region, with lots of problems such as poverty, corruption, discrimination, unemployment, those problems will get worse if our leaders in our region will resist this change. Any government which does not change will not stay the same, but instead will move backward. So we in the Middle East will be facing an era of violence, terror, and isolation. So what can we do, the people, and what can they do, our leaders? I believe that there is a solution for today's leaders and for the countries. A solution may give tomorrow's generation a better future and good future to a prosper our region, so we can all live and work together. So 4 parts of my solution I suggest here. First, the rule of law. Second, empowering women. Third, education. And fourth, peace. The rule of law and how can we be achieved? In every society, the basic to reform it is to apply the rule of law. We need to have an independent judges to make their decision without any pressure, fairly, with so much justice. Frankly, I'm a very pessimist because the government in Middle East don't tolerate with the civil society's institutions. They are threatened by the idea of sharing the power. I think the government in Middle East making a big mistake in not including the civil societies in the daily life. Instead, government should work together with non-profit organization and law society to have the rule of law. An example of what happened last July in Damascus, the British Syrian Society organized this amazing conference about law in Syria. And we were in the same conference room with many government officials, lots of lawyers, members of parliament, lots of NGOs. We were calling for reform for the rule of law, for independent judges. And the conversations and the steam there, it was so wonderful. And this is the way we need all of us in the Middle East to work together, government, law societies, and NGOs to reform the law. And the secularism, the secular government must be the norm in our Middle East. We should separate the state from religion. The religion is for God, and the state is for all of us. And the rule of law must stand free from all religions. And it's very important for the rule of law to have a free press. A free press can support the honest judges and expose the dishonest one. Second, empowering women, and this is the subject close to Hale's heart and my heart. All of you might know what Hale does in Washington, but I was one of the privileged people knows what Hale does in our part of the world and how much a good example she's setting. And when we talk about empowering women, I'm not trying here to break the families like many other people in the Middle East think. But if women are capable to do great things in the society and they can balance their work, family, and making a difference in their society, I'm just telling them, don't stop those women. Let them do and make a difference. History proved that women can be a great leaders. And it is very healthy for the society to have women include and work there. Let me ask you something. When you don't include 50% of the society, I'm sorry to say this, but 50 effective, good half, make your math and say, can we make a difference with the society excluding the women there? Third, education. And we keep hearing the message, education, education, education. What I'm calling today for education for all. Not only education for all, equality education for all, good education. Education can teach our children to challenge their teachers, to have more discussions in the classroom, to have more challenge, to more explore, to get more ideas, to change the mentality of our teachers, to share in the classroom, to get more discussion there. Remember, poverty, ignorance, and terrors goes very well together. So when we fight ignorance, we kill the poverty and we kill the nest of terrors. What we need from our government in the Middle East to build schools as much as they are building mosque, churches, or synagogues. Have time? Still have time?
Yes.
Peace. Another question, how much we spend money in Middle East in killing each other? And with the present economic crisis, putting huge problems on government budget, we cannot to spend more fruitless war. I don't want to try to tell you how much you in the States, you're spending money on the war of Iraq or Afghanistan instead of building better education for the people there. So if we have a durable peace, this money could be spent on social projects, hospitals, and good things for the society. Because the only one who suffers the most from war are the poor people in the Middle East. The poor are paying the expensive price in losing the present and the dream of a better future for their children. So without being idealistic, but let's think about Mandela, what he said, peaceful change, willingness to forgive. This has put the South Africa, one of the most powerful countries in Africa. Yes, we need peaceful coexistence with Israel based on justice, together with other reforms mentioned. This is can lead all the Arab countries, include Israel, together to be a model for the coexistence of the world. So the more fighting we do, the more money we spend, the less money we spend on the reforms. And of course, less chance for our countries in Middle East to get better. There is no way to peace. Peace is the way. By the way, this is Gandhi, not me. I'm saying this. So, my friends, ladies and gentlemen, role model, mentors, you might ask me solutions, and who are we, the people, to give a solution? And who will listen to us in the Middle East? Who are we really to listen to us? And how can we get solution to be effective? We might not have Mandela or Gandhi or Martin Luther King, but I think we need to create an environment for change in our societies. Together with the forward thinkers, with a great mind, with the good patriots in Syria and Middle East, we need to get all of us working together for this peace. And we have to convince our policymakers this is what we need. The intellect elite in the Middle East should assume a primary role in the process of the change. Even if some of them are in prison, as I mentioned before, or the others are oppressed, but we shouldn't quit. Never, never, never give up. This is what Winston Churchill once said, and I'm saying it now. We cannot give up. Even if we are in prisons or oppressed, we should keep trying to make our societies better. So we need slow changes with baby steps, with non-violence, and at the same time trying to soften our leaders in Middle East and convince them without threatening them that change should happen, without sanctioning them, with engaging them that we need to change. And the message has to be clear that there will be no reform in the Middle East without the rule of law. And there will be no reform in Middle East without empowering women, include her in the society. And there will be no reform in the Middle East without the good education for everybody. And there will be no reform in Middle East without peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we now open the floor to questions and comments, I'm going to ask you the first question, Hind. Could you are involved in interfaith dialogue, bringing, as you told me, a group of Muslim, Jewish, and Christian activists, and are you able to do that in Syria precisely because it's a secular state and you are not a Muslim, or what? I mean, what is the reason that you have this freedom of maneuver and being able to do this?
In Syria, like in our ID won't mention any religion, so we're Syrian first and foremost. But I think in Syria we have a tolerance and more open society in religion. Like in my life, I always can practice my religion freely and openly. And I've been neighbors all my life in the old city of Damascus with Jewish, Shiite, and all kind, and we never had any problems. But with the interfaith, I think because of the city, the tolerance of Damascus, this is how we can start our interfaith. That's why we picked Damascus with my other friends to start there, because it is an open and it was more accessible for the others.
Okay, thank you. Now questions. Do you have a question?
A quick announcement. For all the people who came in late, this camera...
I'm sorry, we can't, forgive me, but we would like to just continue with our thing.
I just want to announce quickly that this is being filmed for a project on Middle East that might be used on the internet. It's being filmed for a Middle East project, just for the people who came in late. Everybody okay with that? Thanks.
Is there any question, please, among the audience? No question?
No question.
Yes, I see a hand in the back. Please wait for the microphone.
Yes, hello. Firas Maqsad of the Lebanon Renaissance Foundation. Thank you for being with us today, and Hala, thanks for hosting her. Obviously, what I heard today is great for somebody who's part Lebanese and who comes from and visits often. I was very interested on your website that your kids are big fans of Hassan Nasrallah, and you draw parallels between him and Mandela. You also speak of your support for the Syrian Socialist Nationalist Party, which believes that in Greater Syria and that Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, Jordan should all be part of Greater Syria. Do you view these as being the leaders of reform and change in the Middle East?
First of all, thank you. I give my children the full freedom to practice their beliefs, and I don't pressure anybody to believe in Mandela or Hassan Nasrallah. So my children are free to believe whatever they want to do. So I don't have any influence on them.
Thank you. Hind, could you talk a little bit more about the rule of law? I mean, really knowing that the situation in different countries in the region, and you also, said that the intellectuals should be at the forefront of a number of these activities. But then let's take the example of Egypt, for example. We have Sa'd Ibrahim, and I mention him because he was a former public policy scholar at the center, and he spoke here recently. I mean, he's not living in exile. He cannot go back to Egypt precisely because he has been propagating these kind of things, the rule of law, peaceful coexistence, the necessity for women's empowerment and education, etc. What does it take to convince the leaders in the region that civil society, the rule of law, does not necessarily endanger the regime?
This is usually, the answer won't come so easily and so quickly. We need to have step by step, and the change should be very slowly. And I think so highly of Sa'd Ibrahim, by the way, and my message always, we need always to keep trying. Look at what happened in the French Revolution. It didn't happen overnight. People, we need to change slowly, and we need to convince our leaders. And we cannot threaten anybody. We can just do it slowly.
Alan, just if you could wait for the, because
you gave some great advice to the various leaders in the Middle East in terms of government leaders, education leaders, etc. While it may be risky, what kind of advice would you give to the leaders of the United States in government and others, particularly in the light of a new administration? How can we in the U.S., education, or government, or others, how can we help attain the goals that you laid out for the Middle East?
Thank you, President Martin. First advice I can tell, learn about us more. You need to learn more about the other people. You need to open to see the other people in the other part of the world, how they do things. You cannot impose for us a formula for change. We can have our democracy, but not yours. We can have our values, but it's not yours. The only things we can do, you learn about us, because we learn from you, and we need to learn from each other. So the only advice is learn more about us and be open for us.
Yes, the lady in the back. Just wait for the mic, it's right there.
Arwa from the Embassy of Syria. Thank you for your discussion, and I would like to ask you a question. Looking at the cultural diversity factor in the Middle East, where do you see the role and future of women in the Middle East in general?
What's your name?
Arwa.
Arwa. Okay,
Arwa.
thank you.
Okay.
First, I spoke about the women's status in Middle East in general, but we have in Syria a vice president, and we have an advisor for information and politics, and they're all women. And we have many women in Syria, they're very involved. We have member of parliament, ambassadors, they're all involved. And I think we need, but it is not enough. It's not like enough. And why not have a prime minister, woman prime minister in Syria? So we cannot, the sky should be our limit. Like, we cannot say, yeah, in Syria we have a vice president, and that's great, and let's now take a break for another 20 years. We need to keep trying until we become one day a prime minister. And we need to influence the other women in the area, in the Middle East, that this is the role model. We need to convince them that they need to change, and we need to get them more involved in the daily life and in the political life.
Yes, please, just wait for the mic.
Hind, thank you very much for the wonderful talk. My name is Mark Gopin, George Mason University. I want to follow on Dr. Merton's issue that he raised and say that one of the things that, as an American, that disturbs me is that so many of the challenges in the Middle East are things that have been challenges and evolving challenges in the West for centuries as they evolved their democratic institutions. And there's a tendency to, like, for example, women's equality, interreligious equality. These have been things that have hounded the West. And there's a tendency to disrespect the Arab world as if the West has all the answers and you have all the problems. So how can you help people in this city be more respectful as they engage the Middle East and help with reform and change without demeaning words like behavior change and all of these things that act as if this is a world of children, and when in fact these are challenges that are global, that are universal. We had the same economic problems here 100 years ago with equality and with monopolization of economies and the rule of law. So can you give us some advice on how to go to the Middle East and how not to go to the Middle East?
First of all, you need to learn more about Middle East before you come and we start any discussions. Second, like I said, you cannot give us a formula that we need to change it and we don't like what you're doing, whatever. What you can be a silent mentor. You can help sending education, schools and project in education, hospitals. We can learn from you, but you have to learn first from us too. So I think here we cannot involve giving us things to do in the morning, like you wake up here in Washington and you think that, okay, this is the list to do for the Middle East, and we cannot do this. We have our dignity, and we've been there for 2,000 years. I'm a Christian from Syria, and my family Christian for 2,000 years. So I don't want anybody to give me what can I do and what can I do, and I am a bad people and they are the good people. So this won't work in Middle East.
Yes, please. Just wait for the mic, please.
Thank you again for coming and opening up a discussion. I'm Elizabeth Thompson. I actually wrote a book on Syrian history about the period under French rule and late Ottoman rule. And I wonder if you might revisit your use of the term immature, because in fact Syria can draw on, in its own past, a democratic history, participation in constitutional politics, periods of time up through the 1950s where there was a press. Is it really a matter of having to teach a political culture to Syria, or are there other factors, political or economic, that we need to address in terms of thinking about how to change what's happening in Syria? Thanks.
In my papers, when I say about immature, I'm not talking about Syria. I'm not singling out Syria. It's all about Middle East. So in my papers, I was very general. So, but your question about Syria, and it is like really, I don't know how to answer this question very well. I don't know how to answer this because it makes me a little bit uncertain about what I know and what I can't know. But simply, maybe I should. I don't really know. Yeah, I should pass this question.
Did you get the question? It was that Syria has had a past of democracy and rule of law and so on, and it changed. So there are other elements involved rather than being immature. The ambassador, would you care to comment on that? Not as ambassador, but as someone
a friend
who has studied Syria. Just briefly, that there is this past and the dilemma for a lot of other countries.
I really don't want to comment.
Wait.
Because she's a friend of mine, and I don't want to ruin our friendship.
No.
Actually, this is very complicated. I believe, as a principle, in what should be said as horses for courses. First, a comment on the immaturity of the Middle Eastern governments. Well, can you elaborate a little bit about the maturity of the American administration that lied to its nation and the world and destroyed our region? When you hear, no, listen, Hind. In a way, I am disturbed. I have to be honest with you. As you know, not as an ambassador, as a human being from that region, I participated in writing the reports on the United Nations Human Development Report, and I addressed all the issues that you have just addressed. But what disturbs me, I have to be candid with you, is you come from Syria, you travel across the ocean, you come to the United States of America, you come to Washington, D.C., the city that is most responsible for the great woes that have befallen our region. Because of the misguided policies towards us, the violence, the bloodshed. 500,000 Iraqi children died in Iraq prior to the war on Iraq because of the sanctions imposed on your own country, the destruction of Lebanon in 2006, the destruction 2/3 of the infrastructure of Lebanon, the humiliation that the Palestinian nation is suffering for the past 50 years. And you are talking here in Washington, D.C. to American people about problems that are true, genuine, that we address in our region, that I have personally addressed in my reports. I feel disturbed. I think all the problems you have just discussed are legitimate, true, authentic. We really need to think about. But you also need to remind the people that while this is happening, while these problems are true, look at the destruction of Iraq. Look at the humiliation of the Iraqi people.
That point that was raised?
Yeah, but
no, I mean specifically.
You asked me to comment. I was not.
Said comment.
Yes, but I have to be clear about this. These issues are real and genuine. I'm not belittling these issues. Of course, I agree with many things you have said, and I profoundly disagree with certain things you have said, like the immaturity of political regimes here. Where are the... You quote Churchill, because here in the Western mentality, Churchill is considered a grandee of the Western civilization and culture. In our region, he is considered an imperialistic colonial master. You need to understand the cultural nuance and differences between us and them, with great respect to both cultures and civilizations, of course. And I highly commend your efforts to make bridges. But Hind, you need to remember the great problems we are facing right now in our region, in addition to the problems that we are responsible for, that has nothing to do with the United States of America. But the greatest problems have to do with the United States. You barely touched on these problems. You focused on problems that we should address by ourselves. And I agree with you. But I'm a little bit disappointed that you come here and all these major events, catalytic events that took place in our region, you barely touch on them, and you touch on the issues that we should have been addressing back in our countries.
Mr. Ambassador, we have had a series of meetings talking about the United States and in the region, So we have covered that a lot, and this was an opportunity to hear from an activist, who is trying to go beyond finding fault once again and sort of trying to explain what she is doing. So I think in all respect for what you said, but I think that Hind remained within the topic that she was going to discuss. Fair enough. I mean, the deficiencies that was mentioned in the Arab Development Report, she listed them, and you are part of one of the authors. So I think thank you for your intervention. Yes, in the back, please. Thank you.
Raymond Schonholtz at the Wilson Center. Maybe bridging the last two questions with something a little more specific. I think the 4 points you raised, I think, are in the reports and people are quite aware of them. But in terms of U.S. policy that relates to assistance in the area, maybe you can give us some guidance. As you well know, in the civil society area, mostly in the region, particularly Egypt, organizations like the Middle East Partnership Initiative, promoted by the U.S. State Department, USAID funding in the region, particularly in Egypt, West Bank, and other places, is highly controversial in the civil society areas of many of these countries. What would be your recommendation for the type of promotion or the approach that ought to be taken by assistance programs, whether it's USAID or State Department or the European Union for that matter, that would overcome the concerns and issues by civil society in the receipt of such funds or working in partnership with organizations that are working in the 4 areas that you mentioned?
First, for the civil society to work well should be within the society on the grassroots. And I'm not trying now to confirm what Imad said, but once I've been asked in the embassy, in the U.S. embassy in Damascus, about what's the message can we get to the people about a human right, I said one thing: U.S. is not the role model for us in human right. So what you need to get to the grassroots and get involved with us in the expertise, maybe to give us education, but on grassroots, and don't get involved in telling us what to do and what not to do. This is the only advice I can give.
Yes, please.
I would like to try to answer the question that was raised by the lady, whether Syria could go back and dip into its political culture, I think during a brief period, probably the Kabawat period, where constitutional democracy was, in fact, the norm. I think one could go back to that era and in attempt to say that this is not totally alien to us, but what needs to be done is a little bit more awareness at all levels. Now, you know how many generations have passed since that period. You need a generation who would absorb and be convinced and be ready to fight. Now, Hind has raised the issue of change. Change takes place, the word is in flux in a sense, and it could take place in any direction. Now, when we know that there is a change maturing, we know that there is a need that the forces of change overcome the forces of resistance to change. We know that there are forces of change in a direction that would take back to fundamentalist areas that we have to be very aware of, and they could be forces of change. In what direction? This is a big question mark. But the issue that you have raised, it is there a culture of sort, but it needs a great deal of reviving.
No, sorry. No. We take one last question because our time is up, please. Can you, gentleman here, thank you. This is our last question.
Ross Allen from the here in Washington. In your talk, you mentioned a couple of times Turkey as a sort of comparison or as a model. Are there countries, perhaps non-Western countries, that you see as better examples, or countries that you can have a better dialogue with, perhaps? When I was working in Palestine, I know there lots of people said that Turkey was one, maybe Malaysia, another of countries that they saw as maybe more appropriate comparisons.
I compared with Turkey because it's the closest to us geographically. We have so many things in common, and when you have an example close to you, it will be easier to compare. That's why I used Turkey, not the others country.
Thank you. Our time is up. I thank you all for coming. Thank you, Hind, for your presentation.
Thank you.